Hello, BookTube. I'm continuing with my 2023 library tour, my shelf tour for all of the print and paper books that I have in the year 2023. And I am finishing up this first bookcase with a shelf that's all the way down at the floor. So I am indeed going to be bouncing in and out of the camera just a bit. We'll start off with a book that we've seen on this channel many, many times because I use it. I use a lot of the books in this room. That's kind of the ticket of admission to get into this little book room is that I use the books. This is the Oxford Book of English Verse, edited by Helen Gardner. This is her update on the famous Quiller Couch edition that is one of the most famous anthologies ever made about anything. This takes a lot of the weird individual concentrations, let's just call them, of Quiller Couch and tames them just a bit. There isn't quite so much. This isn't quite so much an individual vision anthology as it is something that is meant to be representative. It still has Helen Gardner's vision, but it's much more meant to be representative. We've talked about this when it comes to anthologies. I think we talked about it yesterday. Those are the two kinds of anthologies that you can have, right? Those are the two diametric poles that you can have. One is that something is dutiful and representative. In other words, it checks off boxes. And the other is an anthology that is more an expression of the anthologist's vision, regardless of what is included and what isn't, even at the risk of being a little bit lopsided in terms of demographic representation or style representation or whatnot, which is why those anthologies, the second kind, the kind that are guided by a personal vision, far more than by a sense of representation, can be genius. And Quiller Couch's original Oxford Book of English Verse is genius, which is why if I had a magic wand and I could just make Penguin Classics, I would make a Black Spine Penguin Classic of the Quiller Couch Oxford Book of English Verse, with a new introduction, tons and tons of notes explaining a lot of the poets who are in that anthology are forgotten now. And I would enshrine it in Penguin Classics because it is a great work on its own. This is great. It's a fantastic anthology, but it's much more along the lines, it's looking much more towards what an anthology should do. This next one is a big modern library. Oh, right. Yes, indeed. Oh, how lovely. How lovely. This is a classic. This is a beautiful edition of Bullfinchs Mythology in the modern library paperback here that I've reinforced it a bunch of ways, but even so, I love this volume, but it is not going to last long. I go back to this a lot. This is Thomas Bullfinch's famous collection and summary of first Greek myths, then medieval mythology, Norse mythology, all retold and wrapped all around in the literary and stagecraft and also especially poetic echoes of all of those stories in the literature that followed over the centuries. Just an amazing work. Just an amazing work. We mentioned the other day the name of Edward Everett Hale. He also has his fingers all over this. You'd never know it. You won't know who he is, but nevertheless. Bullfinch was, of course, a great Massachusetts author. And this is a great reading experience. It's been totally superseded by Edith Hamilton, for instance, to start off with. Edith Hamilton did a collection of the same thing, a book retelling Greek myths, with a little bit of other mythologies mixed in that ended up supplanting this. Bullfinch's Mythology was a much more adult, much more abstruse book. Tons and tons of literary allusions. Publishers found their bread and butter was better served with something like the Edith Hamilton volume. I love them both. And I go back to this volume, but this volume, no matter how much I've reinforced it, this volume is not going to last many more hurried consultations or rereads from start to finish. It's not going to take much more of that. So I keep looking. There are a couple of old, heavily illustrated, hardcover editions of Bullfinch's Mythology. There are a couple that I know of that I know I really like. I think both of them are now going on to well around a century old, but they will turn out at the Brattle Bookshop. The Brattle will provide. Sooner or later, I will find a hardcover with a dust jacket version of Bullfinch's Mythology that I that I really like, that I want. And then, sadly, I will retire that Modern Library edition, which is a nice edition. Okay, this next one is by Anne Boyd Ryu. This is a fantastic book. Oh my, you would love it. This is Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy, The Story of Little Women and Why It Still Matters. This is a lovely, I kept the hardcover because it's got lovely deckled edges. I don't know if I'm blurbed on the paperback, but I sang the praises of this book. I thought it was absolutely incredible. It's all about the story of Little Women, how it got printed, how it was originally received, how its reputation grew, what's going on in it, how it was composed by the great Massachusetts writer, Louisa May Alcott. And it falls under the heading of that type of book that is a study of the history of a book, of a particular book. I have a sweet tooth for those kinds of books. Sometimes they can be just a pedant's nightmare, where the author studies up on one book and then bores you with every single footnote they have ever chased down, and it ruins everything for you. It can even ruin the book for you. But sometimes not. And when it takes off like it does here, when it's clearly just glowing with love, then it's utterly fantastic. I thought this was just utterly fantastic. Just amazingly gripping. It doesn't really matter to me what my relationship with the particular book is when we're talking about the little subgenre of books about the history of particular books. I don't have to like the book in order for me to love the book about the history of the book and the creation of the book. I forget the name, we'll get to it on this library tour. There was a book about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that, all about the Grapes of Wrath. Reading it, but also studying its print history, its origin and all. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I'm not all that big a fan of the Grapes of Wrath. I've read books like that about James Joyce's Ulysses. It still managed to do it for me, so I cannot recommend this strongly enough. I know there are quite a few of you out there who like Little Women, or maybe Louisa May Alcott just writ large, more than I do. I bet there are a lot of you out there for whom that is true. You might not know about this book. Oh my, should you know about this book? Everyone should read it because it's just utterly wonderful. But Louisa May Alcott fans absolutely should not miss this book. Absolutely not. Okay, so we'll wedge that down there and get this next one. Oh my. Oh, very good. Okay, this is Sailor Historian, the best of Samuel Eliot Morison. This is an anthology of bits and pieces, great writing, letters and whatnot, essays, chunks of books by the great Massachusetts writer, Samuel Eliot Morison. If you're noticing a trend here, well, it's justified because Massachusetts is the hub of the universe. It's the greatest state in the Union, the greatest state in the history of states of the Union. So we have Thomas Bullfinch, we have Louisa May Alcott, we have Samuel Eliot Morison, and we have lots and lots of other people too, who are great Massachusetts writers. I have mentioned Morison on this channel many, many times before. I love his work. He was a biographer and a naval historian. He wrote an absolutely unbelievably good multi-volume history of the United States Navy during World War II. It's not a light undertaking. It will take you a long time to read through all of those books, but nothing like them has ever appeared. No work of history has ever quite been like that set. He abridged that into a one-volume book, The Two-Ocean War, which is extremely worth your time, but he wrote tons of other stuff too, and a lot of it is included in here. This is just a delightful anthology, a sort of a reflection of an anthology that reflects the fact that Eliot wrote a large amount of stuff. So, a reader that wants a taste of Eliot, that wants to be introduced to him, you might encounter a book here and there, but you have a lot in front of you. You have a lifetime of reading. To read and reread this author is a lifetime of reading. So an anthology like this was a good idea. I was very happy to see it occur. Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, I didn't know this was down here, but that's great. This is a terrific book. Oh my. So this came out in 2019. This is by Mike Pearl, who, for all I know, may be a great Massachusetts writer. I don't know. This is The Day It Finally Happens. where he takes the reader through all kinds of catastrophes, all kinds of end of the world scenarios or the world changes forever scenarios, and assesses how likely they are, first of all. How much do you need to worry about them? How likely are they to happen? Then what would their most likely form take? What would actually happen on the day that there is finally a thermonuclear war? Or a gigantic thermonuclear act of terrorism, or an alien invasion, or catastrophic climate change, or the eruption of a supervolcano, I think, is in here, if I remember correctly. I loved this book. But as you can tell, just look at the cover. What's the first thing that jumps out at you now? That you almost recoil when you see. We all know it now. That virus. There's a virus on the cover. In 2019, one of the eventualities described in this book had not yet happened. We've all lived through that now. One of the things on this cover jumps out at all of us. Which chapter is that? The day the UK finally abolishes the monarchy, the day doping is allowed in the Olympics, the day humans become immortal, the day anyone can imitate anyone else perfectly. See, it's not all catastrophes. They're also just things that are likely to come down the line and how it will affect our lives. The day Saudi Arabia pumps its last barrel of oil, the day antibiotics don't work anymore. That is coming fast upon us. The day the last fish in the ocean dies, the day nuclear bombs kill us all, the day the internet goes down, the day we get confirmed signals from extraterrestrials, the day the next supervolcano erupts. There's one in here, the day the last slaughterhouse closes, that I think might be the one that talks tangentially about a worldwide pandemic. But it's fascinating because you read this and you think, well, okay, when this came out, the author and all the rest of us never heard of COVID-19. And we had no idea what was coming. And then it came, and then it happened. So what about the rest of the stuff in here? The day that antibiotics stop working, that day is not far off. But there are lots of others, too. There are lots of others that are coming. Really entertaining. I wish that it had been longer. And sometimes, at some points in the book, I wished it had been a little more serious. A little bit more granular detail. Anybody who's going to pick up a book like this is going to be ready for a little bit of hard science, for a little more hard science than the author actually provides. But still fascinating. So that is it. Those are all the books on that bottom shelf. Now, all I have to decide next time is, do I go all the way to the top of the next bookcase, or do I start on the bottom? If I start on the bottom, that might be easier for me. I think I could. Yes, I can reach the books on the bottom shelf there without really dipping too much in and out of the camera range. And then I'm in range of 5 shelves. Okay, so that's what I'll do. Executive decision time. I will start at the bottom of the next bookcase. So we will move on. We're certainly not keeping count of different bookcases. We're just going to move through our library tour. That's all. So I will wrap this up and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.